Are double dies your worst enemy? Can you identify double dies? I mean, is it something you have a lot of trouble with? Then you want to watch this video. I'm going to go over some details about double dies and exactly what double dies are. So stay tuned. Okay, doubled dies are dies that are doubled. A coin with a double die was struck by a die that was already doubled. This is a die. The face of this die was ground off, but it was actually a state quarter die. Now, we all know you have the hammer die, you have the anvil die. I kind of got an idea that they hit a planchet and strike the coin. What we want to look at is how double dies are formed. And what you have is a master hub. The master hub has the design of the coin raised on the surface. Okay, it's the positive. Used to, before the 90s, there was what they call the double squeeze method, and you have a die that has a conical shape, and it's the working die. This is the die that strikes the coins. You have the master hub that comes down into that for the first squeeze. Okay, a lot of times after the first squeeze, what they would do is take the working die with the first squeeze in it, which has an incuse, real shallow incuse design at this point, take it to the oven and anneal it, heat it up to soften it so that it can accept the next squeeze. When they did that, sometimes they would reinstall the die counterclockwise or maybe even tilt it a little bit or whatever, and it would actually, when it did the second squeeze, it would create a second impression of the design right next to what already was squeezed into the die. Sometimes that impression was a little bit weaker, sometimes it was the same, it was strong, and it depends on which double die you're talking about, because there are 8 different classes. I've heard 9 different classes. Wexler has 8 listed, but for the sake of argument here, we're going to be looking at double dies that are created from the double and the single squeeze. Now, the single squeeze method was used now, currently, to prevent double dies from occurring, but it actually did the opposite. It stopped certain double dies from being formed. Those dies for the single squeeze are not as stationary as the dies that the way they did the master hubs during the double squeeze. So whenever the die is making the impression, it can sometimes move into place. If it was out of place a little bit, that forms the second impression. You can see that on the 2009 where the lettering is into the piano keys. It's a nice little spread on that. I'm not trying to get into all the classes because people need to understand double dies versus strike doubling. And the bottom line is that you had the master hub, I'm going to be redundant here, and it did the squeeze into the working die. So we can pretend this is a working die, and it actually doubled that die. The coin itself is a blank planchet that gets in the coining chamber. It has no doubled nothing on it. Okay, so it's struck with a double die. In my opinion, I think we should be calling them struck by a double die, just like we do struck through a piece of cloth. Because when you call a coin a double die, it confuses people into thinking that the coin's actually doubled. The design is doubled, but it was struck by a die that was doubled. That's very important here, because people are confusing it with strike double coins or mechanical double coins or push doubling or chatter, whatever you want to call ejection chatter, whatever it is that you name your strike doubling, okay, happens during the strike. And the die itself is not doubled at all. Now, I'm not saying that they don't both occur at one time. It has happened. That's not the point. The point of it is that if you want to attribute a double die, okay, it's not a strike double coin. All your major double dies, anything that's worth money is not strike double 2 or mechanical double or whatever you want to call it. It's a double die, and that's what it is. So to kind of clarify, a double die coin is actually struck by a doubled die. Okay, a strike double coin is struck by a die that was not installed properly. And let's say there's a little bit of play. So what happens is you've got a normal die, and a planchet gets into the coining chamber. The die comes down, strikes the coin, and it moves a little bit. It jars. When it does that, it actually cuts into the devices of the coin. It doesn't have to be on all parts of the design. It can be just on the mint mark. It can just be on part of the date. But the bottom line is that there is a movement. And that movement actually scrapes metal like a snow shovel or like an X-Acto knife away from the sides of the letters, the numbers, the bust, whatever design feature it is. Okay? Completely different from a double die. Not even related whatsoever. So now, when you have a strike double coin, you have a coin that was actually damaged by the die. It was damaged because the die scraped metal away. And that letter, that bust, or that number, whichever it might be, is actually smaller now. It looks like it's doubled, but it's not double. It's actually smaller because you took metal away from it. Now, obviously that mass is spread out. I do want to also clarify that there are different types of strike doubling. You have flat filled, where the die was closer to the face when it moved, and it looks really flat, and a lot of times that'll be pretty wide. It'll have a wide flat shelf-like area. And then you have it in the middle, where the die started retracting even more, and it's kind of like in the middle of the, and I call it middle filled, basically, where it'll cut into the side and spread a little bit, but it won't be that wide of a shelf. And then there's the high filled, which, in other words, barely cut into the top of the design. And this is the one that fools a lot of people. I do have an example of this I want to show you. It's so high up on the numbers or letters that it almost looks like it could be a double die because it shows a very small shelf. And you almost have to see that with magnification. So that way you know that there are different kinds of strike double coins, okay? And that's important because that way you can understand whatever level they are whenever that die scraped into the side of the numbers or the letters, that it's still not a double die because it's still not making the letters, the numbers, or the devices of any way, shape, or form larger. It's not a double impression. It's not a thicker impression. It's not a distant, whatever it would take. So I want to show you a little bit, some diagrams here I want to do for you. I'm going to try to do this. Okay, one thing I want everybody to realize, I'm going to draw a 1 as it is on a Lincoln cent or a coin. And when you're thinking about a loose die, a die that is not stationary, and if it jars when it's retracting from the devices or strike, then it's actually going to, the edge of that die cavity for the 1, let's say here, is going to actually cut. And it's going to create what we call a shelf-like appearance. And this is it. It actually scrapes metal away. Scrapes. This is metal that's scraped away from the 1's side. And it actually makes this area smaller. And you got the metal coming out here. It's just damaged. Okay? Now, when you have a doubled 1 from a doubled die, and that 2 squeezes, or even if the 1 squeeze and it just goes out of place, it won't look exactly like this. For the sake of keeping it as simple as possible here, I want to show you how that looks, or at least it should look to your eyes. And this is like on the 1955 double die and the 1969 double die, S actually. You're looking for actual doubled. It's not strike doubled. It's actually doubled. And this is what it looks like pretty much. And you're looking for an extra thickness, a separation. You don't always have that because, like I said, there is other types of double dies, and I'm not trying to confuse anyone, but there are extra thick lettering that doesn't have some notching on it, and that's called what they call Distended Hub Double. So your Distended Hub Double would just be an extra thicker one. And what happens is with this type of double die, a class 6 double die, in other words, from the heating and the pressure on the dies that were trying to create the working die, the design actually became thicker from the distortion, and it made it thicker lettering. Actually, with the oppression of the lettering and the oppression of the dates and everything is just thicker. Okay, I'm not really wanting to go into all the classes of double dies, but it's hard not to mention them. Most of them are just about the direction, whether it be clockwise, counterclockwise, north, south, things like that. That kind of describes it. You also have tilted hub double, where it's tilted a little bit. And in one of these videos, I'm going to go through every one of those and explain it. But for the sake of this video, I want everyone to just be able to properly identify most double dies that we see and not mistake them for strike doubled coins. Now what I want to do here, I want to also do a 9. 9s are not as easy to draw. And let's see. First, we'll do a normal 9. First off, I want to do a 9. Okay, now, if this 9 is actually doubled, okay, by a double die, then it can look different ways depending on which class of double die it is. But for the sake of being confusing here, I don't want to be confusing, I just want to show you one class. And what you want to look for is a little bit of notching, okay? What we're going to, as you can see, it's already a little bit thicker. Notching's often in this area. A lot of times you will see a little bit of the doubled areas in here, a split. Sometimes the spreads can be pretty wide on these. It's not always wide, but you definitely at the end here, you want to see there's the notching on one of these ends. You know, look really close, sometimes it's really small. I know that I don't want to be confusing with my drawing here, but you know, you got a little bit of a notching. That's what you want to look for. Sometimes it's really light. A lot of times when you've got a T, because T's are a little bit, sometimes they're a little more difficult, but what you'll have is you'll have a little notch right here on the T, or it'll be up here on the T. Same thing with an E. You know, you'll have a little bit of a notching up here. And it won't be on most of the others, but you'll see at the bottom part of it maybe. You'll see a little bit of a notch. Another thing is like on the Y's. You'll often see a Y, and it'll just have a little bit of the notching at the bottom. And that's one of the things you can look for too. It doesn't mean that they has to have notching, but most of the time your double dies are going to have some type of notching on them. You know, some type of little separation. Your major double dies like 1955, the 69S, the 72, 001, those are extreme separations. I mean, they're really separate. So you can tell the difference in those. It looks just like the one back here. It looks just like this right here pretty much. I mean, you can really see it, its separations on it. Here we're going to look at some pictures of strike doubled coins. And I know these can be kind of confusing, but when you're looking at coins, you want to look at all directions. Here's an example. It's flat, and it's where the metal's been scraped away. It's got toning in there, so it's hard to see. That's another thing that can confuse people when you see toning. Toning doesn't make a coin a double die. The actual die has to be doubled, the actual features. Right here's another example. It just cut right into it. That's just a cut into the coin. That's the difference here, is what you're looking for. Here's an example that can fool a lot of people. This is cut. It's flat shelf like it's cut. What will confuse some people is in the B, because the B is curved, it kind of looks like it might be doubled. You see that? But it's actually so high up in what I was calling high field double die, which is really not on the field, but it's just for want of a better word trying to describe this. The die actually almost completely retracted off this coin when after it struck it, and just jarred enough to cut into the tops of the devices. That's why this kind of strike double and mechanical doubling is hard to identify for some people. And when you get on such a small coin, this is on a 10th ounce $5 gold coin, when you find it on such a small coin, it can be very confusing. Here's an example. It's a little bit blurry, but here's the 9 that's been cut into, that's flat, shelf-like. You're trying to decipher. Also, you see it on the mint mark, then you know it's definitely strike doubled, because back in 1974, the mint marks were hand punched into the die. So the die would already have been created, and would already have been created as doubled. So the mint mark was put on afterwards. So if you see this on the mint mark, then you know that this is not going to be a double die. That'll help you identify it as well. Here is some die deterioration, strike doubled areas. As you can see, I'm pointing out. I'm going to go through these here with you. I've got several images to show you, but it's very important. Redundancy in this is very important until you understand it, until you learn to identify it, eyeball this stuff. Here's another example of the same coin. It's a Roosevelt Dime. Roosevelt Dimes are notorious for die deterioration, and you can see it. There's a little bit of ejection chatter, what they call it. Just it's all messed up and just flat. Double dies just don't look that busy. Here's another example. I see images like this in the forum and in the Facebook groups, and this is just where the die cavity is starting to erode, and you can see the die deterioration here. And this is what you would call the die deterioration doubling. That's another thing people want to talk about. It's a doubled die, okay? But you have what people call hub doubling and hub doubled. And we say double. Doubled is actually past tense for double. Okay, so it's a double die, it's a doubled die. It's not doubling. I like to use the word doubled. Sometimes it's interchangeably used. It's not worth getting hung up on words too much, because you need to know what this looks like. It's very important to learn the process. Here's some more die deterioration doubling. It's important just to know what it looks like. And here's another 2011 nickel. This one has some strike doubled areas, and it's a little bit of die deterioration, it looks like. Usually die striations are involved when you see die deterioration doubled. One of the things about this that's very important to know is that in 2011 they no longer hand punch the mint marks. After 1989 they stopped hand punching mint marks into the dies, so it's a part of the die. So this couldn't be an RPM. So anything after 1989 is not going to have a repunch mint mark. Here's 91, and this is one of them that gets confused a lot. A lot of people see this. It's a little bit of plate doubling, a little plating issue, maybe push plating or plating disturbance of some sort. And this calls from deterioration. People get this confused a lot. You see the 1991s, the 9s and the 1s, you'll see this a lot on. Here's an example. And this is some of the images that you have to decipher here. This is supposed to be a doubled ear. As you can see the inside of the ear here. But it's a little die deterioration. Here's an example of strike doubled. You can see the areas on the coin, a little bit of deterioration, a little bit of problems with the metal. As you can see here, cut into it. Here is an actual double die right here. The top image is an actual 1969S double die. The bottom image is something that someone sent me thinking it was the real double die. Do you see the differences here in the thickness? Like I said, it's going to depend on which class of double die it is, but you can see definite thickness. It's not here. This is actually thinner when you look at it. Here's another example of strike double coin. You can see it. I tried to draw this for you, and you can see that. It's just flatness, flatness, scraped away from the I, scraped away from the L, scraped away from the B. You know, it's a little more confusing inside a curve. The curves do look different, but it's flat. It's not actually adding to, it's not a doubled feature. Here's another example in a different direction. You can see it's flat where it cut into it. It shoveled away the actual metal from the N and a G and the I. Here's another example of the date. Here's the mint mark again. And the mint marks were hand punched in '68. Remember that. It's just cut. That's actually a cut. I mean, you could take an X-Acto knife and almost mimic that. So there's some strike doubled images. Now we'll look at some actual double die images. And you can see it's extra thickness. This is a little bit blurry, but you can see where it's doubled here, there, and it's not flat. Now sometimes the second impression is not as high as the first one, but most of the time it is. Typically on the smaller coins, it seems like, or coins that have the lower design elements, like on the Monticello, that's a lower design element. Sometimes you'll see a little difference in height. It won't be much, but it's still going to be doubled. Now here is the actual 1955, and these coins are really, I mean, we're talking, they have a separation on them like no other. It's a really nice looking double die, but you can tell. I mean, there's no mistaking a 55 once you see it. Here is a Kennedy $half, the Trust. This one here is quadrupled double dies. This was the impression on this one was several times for whatever reason. We get into the details of all of this, but you can tell 1, 2, 3, and it has some die deterioration. And like I've said in previous videos, some of the die deterioration can confuse you so that you don't see the splits very well, and it looks like kind of a messed up Trust. It just looks kind of messed up, but it's definitely a quadrupled double die. Here's another double die on a Kennedy $half. As you can see, there's a thickness here. The impression is to the east, but here you can see the split. Here's another one. Here's some toning. Toning can throw people off. You can't hardly see the coin very well, and I put these pictures up here on purpose because I want you to be able to help identify and decipher this stuff when you see it under a microscope or on an image online. You can see the split right here. You can see it at the top of the W. This is very common type of double die for Kennedy $half. Look on the ends of the U on the right side, also on the W at the tops, and you'll see where the split serifs are. There's another image of the same coin. Here is a double die reverse, and this image is a little bit blurry as well, but it's very important just to kind of see that how the E's is on this, how the N is, the unum. Here's the 69S double die. We can look at it really close. I'm putting up kind of blurry images because most people that are looking at this stuff they can either have eyesight issues, don't have a good magnification, or whatever it might be. Their cameras aren't that good and they're trying to decipher all this stuff. Even when it's blurry, it's hard to mistake this one. You know, I also want to encourage everyone to go over to our Coin Help community. Go to the search feature and type in strike double coins or double die coins, because we've had, since 2009, for 10 years I've had this forum up, and we've had literally hundreds and hundreds of people who have posted strike double coins, double die coins, and we've actually posted guides up here. It's part of our website. And take a look at some of these images and look at what we have explained to people, you know, over and over, trying to teach them about double dies and strike double coins, and then you get an idea of maybe helping you out even more and seeing more images, because you can't be too redundant until this sinks in, because sometimes it's very difficult to grasp what it's supposed to look like when you're looking at coins because of all the different anomalies that can happen. Here's another example. One of our admins posted this, and it's very good. I mean, you can see the metal that's been moved, it's fatter. You can see the flatness here and the flatness here where the metal's been actually moved away from it. Here's another example, and it just goes on and on. Here's a real double die. It shows the little bit of the split here. So as you can see, we've got all kinds of examples to show you. Our website is just full of this stuff. I mean, I know people say they look all over the internet and they can't find their double die, they can't find their error. Look, all major errors, now they're not saying there's never going to be a new one discovered, but all of them are classified. I mean, we've got them classified and they're underneath different divisions. And one of the things about that is that when you're looking online, if you're not seeing it, more than likely it's probably not going to be the mint error. It's probably not a mint error. But there's just so many resources. You know, send me a post up here on the community. You know, post your pictures up there. That's probably the best thing to do. Also, Wexler's double dies. I want to explain this here. Wexler's die varieties. And you go to his doubledie.com and go to his website. He is one of the most knowledgeable men in the world on double dies, and he has all this information. He actually accepts submissions. It's like $4 a coin plus return shipping. And there's a form at the bottom of this page that you can actually send coins to him. I know that he's a very busy man, and I'm not trying to make it worse on him here by recommending him. There's other people through Konica, Konena, Konica, or this Konica Variety Vista. You can get on there, you can send an email, and they'll direct you to the person to send your coin to. You know, there is a fee for it, and that's understandable because, you know, you get really busy with this stuff trying to help people out. This shows the multiple squeeze hubbing error. It explains the single squeeze error. It shows you images of the dies. It explains all the classifications of the double dies and the single squeeze here. We got an article, like I said. It's very in-depth. More in depth that I'm going into in these videos because I'm trying to be a little more simple, because videos, I mean, I can make a video here, then I can take 2 hours to go through all of this, and that's just too long of a video when I can simplify it a little bit, break it down, just kind of give you the basics, and then you can move on to wexlersdoubledie.com and read his article, read it over and over until, and try to find some examples yourself until it kind of sinks in. You know, it's not talking down to anybody here. I don't want anybody to think that. I'm not insulting your intelligence or anything. I just encourage you to read this before you ever look for double dies. It's just too important to know about them. You waste a lot of time looking at nothing. Waste a lot of time looking at strike double coins. So I hope this helped you with double dies a little bit better. If this helped you understand what a double die is, then I've done my job. You know, like I said, you know, guys, I appreciate you watching the video. I appreciate the likes and the shares and the comments. I truly do. I love helping people. I only have so much time to help people. So that's why I do encourage everyone to go to these links and go to these websites and do a little bit of research and try to teach yourself, because I can only go so far with this. So anyways, you guys have a great day.